Junkyard. You know, me and Junkyard have been having this, discussion for, literal months, I think. Finally, it boiled down to, well, let's make a couple videos, right? And I was preparing myself, to really have an actual battle on my hands, right? I thought he was gonna break out like, schematics and like, EV talk and all this and that, but you made it way too easy, bud. Let me show you how it's really done, alright? So if you're not yet seeing the Junkyard Necromancer video, none of this is going to make any sense to you, so probably go watch that first. But if you've watched it, you will notice, we're going to just go through it step by step here, right? A lean mixture burns slower, a rich mixture burns faster. Right on his whiteboard there, right? This is, something, his core belief that he's, relying all this information on, I guess? Okay. Well, is that true, though? Well, okay. Let's consult Google. Okay, yeah. No, it's totally true. Look at that. Oh, wait, no. Motor Trend says it's not true. So which is it? Well, you get two conflicting statements from two conflicting sources. I guess, really doesn't matter that much because we're not really talking about lean mixture versus rich mixture here. We're talking about cylinder fill. Now, lean and rich mixtures, play a role, but not nearly as much as cylinder fill. And cylinder fill is really why we have advance in the first place. And unlike Junkyard, I'm not, this pseudo-scientist I'm a car guy, so you know what, I'll just do my demonstration on this Krager box here. Cylinder fill is simply how much stuff is in the cylinder. Now, this is not air-fuel ratio. This air-fuel ratio, that air-fuel ratio, exactly the same. But you got to remember, the cylinder is a vacuum. This is not constantly full of air that we're just dumping fuel into. Air and fuel have to come into it. Well, I guess it'd technically be on this side, but, well, no, it doesn't. All right. Air and fuel have to come into it. It doesn't already have air in it. So, cylinder fill is simply how much air and fuel occupies the volume of the cylinder. The less you have, the longer it takes, because each one of these particles has to jump to the next particle, and that takes time in order to fully combust the mixture. You have a dense cylinder fill, well then it's a chain reaction, just, it all combusts rapidly. That is a fast burn, this is a slow burn. So when would these two events occur? When would you have a lower density cylinder fill? When would you have a higher density cylinder fill? Well, it just stands to reason, using common sense. Let's go look at the engine. The only way for air and fuel to get inside the engine is through your throttle body, whatever type it is. And at idle, well, the butterflies are usually pretty much closed. So you could deduce that at idle and on low RPMs, when you're not opening the throttle very much, you're probably having a lower amount of cylinder fill in your engine, because simply the air and fuel can't all make it in there. Depending on what camshaft you're running, how big it is will determine where it really makes power. That has to do with cylinder fill too. Well, your heads, how much your heads flow, if they're small ports or big large ports like a Cleveland head, well, the velocity going through the whole intake system, low velocity, well, you're not getting a whole lot of stuff in there. You have high velocity, you're getting some stuff in there. Unless the port's too small, high velocity through a small port, you're still not getting much in there. But, you know what? Low velocity through a big port, you might get some in there. So it all boils down to what kind of engine you have. And, well, that boils down to how much ignition timing you need. Because the lower density cylinder charge, you need to ignite the charge sooner. Well, if this takes a longer time to fully burn, because it has to jump from molecule to molecule, and there's a big gap in between them all because it's a low density charge, You got to ignite this mixture ahead of time. As the piston's coming up, you need this mixture to start burning, so by the time it gets to top dead center and just a little bit after, it can finally push the piston down. You want peak cylinder pressures to happen right as the piston is starting to come down. Anything before that, you're going to be fighting the piston on the way up. Anything after that, well, then you're missing it. The piston's already traveled down, and the expanding gases cannot expand hard enough to keep pushing it down. What happens when you floor it? What happens when you fully open the butterflies? Well, you are filling the cylinder more. You're getting a denser cylinder charge than when the butterflies were closed. So you don't need quite as much. Not quite as much would be, the typical timing curve you usually have. 30 something total timing, right? That's probably all it needs. But under light cruise or at idle or whatever, right? On not high density filling situations where you're not fully into the throttle, you need more timing. I mean, you could run up to 40, 50, possibly even 60 degrees of timing depending on the combination, and it's totally fine under light cruising. So that's pretty much what Junkyard covered in his video. And then he just kind of claims that, well, manifold vacuum's just the way to go, so do it and you'll be happy. It doesn't really explain too much further than that. Well, that's leaving a lot of meat on the table there. How do you even know how much timing the engine wants? That theory and everything's great and fine, but how do you actually apply it, right? I mean, how do I know how much the cylinder is getting filled? There's no, there's nothing on the outside of the engine that's going to tell me how good it's doing. That's what the gauge is for, the vacuum gauge. The vacuum gauge will tell you exactly how good your engine's doing, how much cylinder fill it has, whether it's hurt or not. The vacuum gauge is the lifeblood, the crucial, piece of information you need for these old-timey engines, right? Oh, even new engines, but, the vacuum has been replaced by electronics with new stuff. And how do we utilize the vacuum gauge? What are we looking for? I mean, what's it going to tell me? Where do I plug it in, right? Okay, well, I can show you exactly how this thing works and explain to you the true differences between manifold and ported vacuum, just so we understand what we're talking about. Now, this is hooked to manifold vacuum at the moment, and I'll explain that in a second. But as you can see, it has a steady, constant vacuum. Now it's hooked to ported vacuum, and as you can see, there's no vacuum at idle. Why is that? Well, it's because ported vacuum is above the throttle blades of the carburetor, and manifold vacuum is below it. Since we're taking our vacuum reading from up here, the throttle blades are closed. Therefore, there's no vacuum at idle. And if we're taking the vacuum reading from down below, well, now you're getting all the suction from the pistons and everything, so you have constant vacuum. Manifold versus ported. That's the difference at idle, without the butterflies open. What happens when you're, putting the gas on, taking it off, you're matting it wide open throttle, you're on deceleration? What's the difference then? They're still on the ported, there's nothing. But, let me come over here. So when you open the throttle with ported vacuum, you actually gain vacuum. You can see the needle jumps up, and it'll jump up according to how much throttle you give it, how rapidly you give it, that kind of thing. But just when it's hooked to ported vacuum, when you apply gas, it will add vacuum. Well, let's try manifold. Now we got to hook back to manifold. What happens when I mess with the carburetor? As you can see, hooked to manifold vacuum, it does the exact opposite. It will take away timing as soon as you do the throttle, and how much throttle you give it, again, determines how much it takes away. So when you want to hammer the thing, it takes all your timing away from you. That's the way it works. Now you know the differences between ported vacuum and manifold vacuum. Now let's talk about vacuum itself. How do you gain more vacuum? How do you lose vacuum? And how does vacuum tell you what's happening inside your cylinders? Well, let me show you. Now our mission is to use all that's inside this cylinder, everything that we can cram in. We want to fully burn it in order to push this piston down. But if we don't fully burn it and we have an incomplete burn, some stuff's going to be left in here. And if there's some stuff left in here, we can fit less in there. If we can fit less in there, then we're going to have a drop in vacuum, because the more suction there is, this is completely empty, that's going to bring more in. You're bringing more in, your vacuum is up. You're bringing less in, your vacuum is down. Now that's when you're at, idle or maybe part throttle, when the throttle blades are not all the way open. When the throttle blades are all the way open, if you have a vacuum, a significant vacuum at wide open throttle, then that means there's a restriction, like too small of a carburetor, or maybe too small of an intake. But otherwise, at idle and light cruise, it tells you exactly what you need to know. Are you using the fuel to its fullest capability that you're fitting inside that cylinder? Well, the way we, look for that, you tune to the highest vacuum. We're starting off here, and we're wanting to tune our carburetor, and we come over here, and we hook onto him, and we start messing around. I'm adding fuel, and as a result, our vacuum has dropped because we're not using the fuel to its fullest capabilities. So we lean the mixture back out, we gain vacuum because now we're better using the fuel we're putting in there. As a result of higher vacuum, usually it equals out to higher RPMs. The two are kind of interconnected that way. You get higher RPMs because it's able to burn the mixture more completely, thus faster, thus rotating the engine faster. When you tune to the highest vacuum, what you're doing is you're putting the engine at its optimal capability. But what you're also doing is you're putting it on a knife edge. Any little disturbance, a little slightly bad fuel, a little bit bad, climate, it gets hot or something like that, and you're too cold, any kind of disturbance, you don't really have margin of error, okay? That's why if you're tuning to the highest vacuum, back it off just a little bit, just give it just a nudge more fuel than optimal. All that's doing is assuring that even if things kind of get unstable a little bit, you're still safe. You can use that exact same method on your timing. You can tune to the highest vacuum with your timing also. And again, just once you reach it, just retard it just a little bit. That way you're still a little bit safe. But that brings us to our vacuum advance and our timing. Well, what's it want? Well, the engine wants whatever it tells you it wants. It doesn't give a rat's ass what you think it wants. The engine will tell you exactly what it wants by increasing the vacuum and increasing the RPM. So all you do is you come over here, you turn it on, right, at idle or at cruise or whatever, increase the timing until it stops building vacuum. If you increase the timing and it builds vacuum, and it stops, you give it a little more, it doesn't move, that means you've used everything you can inside that combustion chamber. There will be a period in time, a slim one, where the amount of timing you have won't really change anything very much because you've already fully combusted this mixture. Starting it sooner won't combust it anymore if you've already used it all. There won't be anything left to, use up. So doing it a little bit more doesn't help you. It doesn't raise the RPM, which signifies better burning. It doesn't raise vacuum, which also signifies complete burning. Then it's not doing you any good to have that extra timing. All that's doing is making it more prone to detonation or, misfiring and stuff like that. And you want to tune to just almost optimal. You want to leave just a little bit room because this is a dynamic environment, right? We're tuning a static, thing for a dynamic environment. Everything changes. You want to build in margins of error into your tune. Now this is just a little vacuum pump, and I got it hooked to the vacuum advance. So clearly, we're adding timing, and it likes it. Hasn't changed. Our little demonstration, however much advance we had when the vacuum stopped building, that would be optimal. You back it off a few degrees. In this demonstration, we just simply maxed out the capabilities of our vacuum pod is all. So this, you want to truly just be doing it with the actual distributor itself. And then use this for fine adjustments like out cruising. And Andy Wood, Uni Motorsports Garage, and David Vizard, the legend himself, have a video all about how to do that. Just showing you that that's kind of the way to do it. Look at their video for a more detail-oriented explanation. I don't want to steal it from them. Go watch their stuff. Now that we've completely dissected vacuum in its entirety, right? Now comes down to the ultimate question. Ported versus manifold. Which one to use for your vacuum advanced distributor? Well, very simple. Manifold vacuum and ported vacuum are only different once you hit the throttle, when you introduce more air into the system. Once it becomes a steady state, once you have opened this as much as you're opening it, very small, increments just cruising down the road, the top side and the bottom side equalize. They become exactly the same. So manifold versus ported, well, at a light cruise, doesn't matter. It's the exact same regardless. The only difference is at idle, there's no vacuum, and when you crack the throttle open, manifold will take vacuum away, where ported will add vacuum. So which do you want? The question's not really about manifold versus ported vacuum. The question is, when you hit the gas, do you want more timing or less timing on the launch or when you're accelerating? Because the mechanical timing, we can adjust to suit our needs. We can set initial timing to 22 degrees if we want to. We can set it to 36 degrees if we want to and just completely lock out the distributor. We can set our mechanical to whatever we want. It's just the vacuum that we cannot set to what we want. It does its own thing based on throttle response. Mechanical, we have full control over. So, if I want 22 degrees of initial timing, just throwing the number out there as an example, not necessarily that you do or don't, 22 degrees initial advance, I can either set this initial timing, mechanical timing, to let's say 8 degrees, and just use manifold vacuum to bring me up the extra, 12 degrees, 14 degrees. And when I hit the gas, when I really want to get going, all my vacuum drops and I go back down to 8 degrees initial timing as I'm trying to get the thing to motor away. Or I can set the initial to 22 mechanical, not have any vacuum, and when I hit it, it will actually give me more timing. So, what do you think? Do you want to leave the starting line on 8 degrees initial timing? Or do you want to leave the starting line at 22? Even if you have your mechanical advance coming in quick, right? Let's say you got it coming in at, 16, 18, 100 RPM. Hey, you got the thing coming in quick. It still takes more time to go all the way from 8 up to the 36, 34, 32, whatever number you have as your total timing. right off the hit when it matters the most. Manifold timing will completely take away all of your timing, take away all of your grunt off the line. And mechanical timing, if you just do mechanical and use ported, you can have all your initial timing and it'll actually give you a little bit more when you need it. Like you've seen, when we blipped the throttle, it spiked and then it came right back down. That initial hit, it gives you more timing right when you need it the most. Right then, you have the timing you need to get off the line. If you've ever bumped up initial timing to try to get more, if you've never experienced it, go ahead, try it. If you have, 10 degrees in there right now, bring it up to 14 and just give it a shot. You will feel the difference. I mean, that's not debatable. There you go. You make your own decisions. I'm not telling the engine what it wants. The engine tells me what it wants by how it reacts. So that's all I got for this episode. I'll catch you next time.